evening, everyone, and thank you very much for being here on a Monday evening. We weren't expecting so many people, so please give yourselves an applause, first of all. In addition to Payal and me, as always, I'd like to name the other women who are your hosts. There's Neena, Shuli, Anjali, Ritu, and Anuja, a young woman who's joined us. So we are your ladies in black, and thank you very, very much for being here. You know, last time that we were here together, last weekend, we spoke about living in a post-truth world and what that means. Today, in some ways, we're going to further explore that, because Trump's victory is not just a political event. It is a sociological phenomenon that I think affects the history of mankind pretty much, and I'm not being exaggerative when I say that. It is a turn of the wheel, and we know all the shock and horror and awe reasons why I'm saying that, so I'm not going to go into it. But in some ways, it literally has put a question mark on liberal values. It has put a question mark on being knowledgeable. It has put a question mark on being truthful. And it really sets the big questions up, civilizational questions for us to answer. We need to read what this victory means, not just for America, for the rest of the world, what it means in terms of technology's intervention in public life, and how it is reshaping reality. And none better to do that than somebody today who is the epitome of what America has rejected. She is whiplash smart, very knowledgeable, very, very self-assured, very confident. She was the editor of Vanity Fair at 23. She has run the New Yorker, the Newsweek, the Daily Beast. She has been at the heart of power, the conjunction between Hollywood, the media, New York, and through all of it, she has had the highest bullshit detector. But before we call Tina Brown on stage, we'd like to play a short film which will remind us again, what is this phenomenon we're talking about? What does Trump's victory mean for us? And what is the role that the media played in creating this phenomenon? So before we welcome Tina Brown, let's have a look at that. Thank you. So to help us understand that, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Tina Brown.
Why did you play that? Why? Brings it all back to me. Ah, horrendous.
Tina, you've already taken away my first question.
All right.
My first question is that if I were to ask you in one line to sum up what you feel about Trump winning, what is that? When you first heard that he'd won.
Well, asteroid was the first thing. This huge meteor landed in our face, and everyone went into the fetal position, literally under the duvet for 2 or 3 days. Followed by kind of days and days of what I can only describe as kind of menstrual cramps. I don't know what it is, but I'm certainly way beyond that time in my life, but it's just beginning to subside. In fact, I ran away to India to get away from the feeling. Finally, people are beginning to function, but it really has been like a bereavement and a wake, certainly in New York City. I mean, I went out to a lunch party 2 or 3 days after the result, and it was a big sort of table. Actually, the David Boyce, the lawyer who was the guy who was actually in charge of the recount, you know, with Al Gore. He was a major lawyer in America who's a political figure as well. He was honoring him, and it was supposed to be his wife was doing a group of people who were all going to be sort of festive about Hillary. And so it was like, you know, Janelita's funeral or something. I mean, everyone was just sort of crying and wailing at the table. It was really embarrassing, in a sense.
But so, Tina, it's literally almost a month to the day now since he won. Have you recalibrated your feelings? Would you describe it differently today from that initial feeling of being in crouch?
Yes, but actually, every day that passes makes me more anxious in different ways. I mean, what I do find, can everyone hear, by the way, or else, because I can use the hand mic otherwise. Hand mic, okay. Hand mic, is that better? Right. What I'm really concerned about is his pervasive lying, which he did all the way through the election, which was so extraordinary in the way no one could land a punch on him that stuck. And somehow you thought, well, after the election, this post-truth thing will be part of this history of his campaign, but it'll then recalibrate, as you put it. But what is now happening is there's a new thing where he tells a giant lie, like, for instance, the latest one being that the recount of Hillary Clinton's, which has got her to 2.5 million, is all stolen votes and fake votes that have come in, which is a complete provable lie, and everyone is saying so. Rance Priebus, who was the head of the RNC, Republican National Committee, who's now about to be President-elect's chief of staff, goes on television, and he is asked, how can Trump continue with this lie about the stolen votes, the fake voting rolls on Hillary Clinton's recount? It is not true. That is demonstrably so. And he said, well, that is what people say, that it may not be true, but I'm not one to say that it isn't true. It could be true, but it's not true. It's a lie. It could possibly be said to be thought to be true. It's like, no, it couldn't be. And how do you, this is a new thing in which the response is, well, I don't know that it isn't true. Sort of totally bold-faced planting the notion that there is some veracity to this huge lie. And that is, I think, extremely alarming, because how do you combat this? Because in the rise of social media, it just gets proliferated, and the amount of lies that people believe now with their own wild sort of apocryphal universe in which they live seems to not be going away, but being a new status quo, and I think that is extremely concerning.
So in fact, Tina, I'm going to come back and cycle back later into all the implications of Trump's victory, as I said, literally for history, for the nature of civilizations and democracies. But before that, there's been so much of analysis in this last month, and it's important for us to keep revisiting this conversation, that according to you at least, what is your diagnosis? What is the top 3 reasons why somebody that everybody accepts is a liar, is the worst face of capitalism, is ignorant, is abusive? Why would a man like that win? What is your diagnosis?
Well, I think there are 2 or 3 or 4 things making a kind of a perfect storm that gave us Trump. First of all, I think it is the sort of apotheosis of the celebrity culture finally reaching its ultimate expression in Trump. I mean, we should not underestimate that he was the star of a wildly successful reality show, which was not the show that most of his critics watched, but which everybody else did. And the imagery of success that he puts forth is one that is very appealing to mass America. I mean, when you look at Trump, there's something, he's an unreconstructed sort of 80s man, right? There is nothing, nobody wants to be really Mark Zuckerberg. He's a sort of pointy-headed, hoodie guy, sort of pallid maths person, in Silicon Valley with his do-gooding and weird. I mean, people don't want to be Mark Zuckerberg. What they actually want to be is this alpha guy with his own plane and a golden tower and all of these blondes it is the Kardashian Camelot imagery. And people have liked that imagery. They understand it. It's a kind of less threatening imagery of success, kind of almost like a Playboy Club era kind of culture, which was a time when people miss that time. They miss when success was that kind of success, when it was less complicated. You could see what made someone successful. He built a golden tower and people went to it. It wasn't some kind of strange digital code that they invented that, you don't really understand why it's made everyone so rich. So I think that imagery of Trump is critically important to his sort of lasting appeal, that people just like looking at him. They like his story. They want to hear his story. And I think that the celebrity piece of it is that we need to be entertained now all the time. The entertainment culture has got to the point where it's entered politics. And if you are not an entertaining person and can create a story and an act that lasts for the whole year and a half of your campaign, you are not going to hold any eyeballs and nobody wants to watch your show. And that is true. I mean, people liked the Trump show. They tuned in. It was exciting. The debates have never been more charismatic. Meanwhile, off on some other stump in some other world, almost like a different world, a different planet, Hillary Clinton was plodding away, talking about healthcare and talking about global warming and talking like a politician in a different movie, a movie from you don't want to see, a movie that was last year's show. And it just was really, that was the critical thing, I think, was this entertainment factor of Trump.
But Tina, this is the terrifying thing about media, and both of us are from the media fraternity, and I'd like to take full responsibility for the failure of us and our community, which is all about framing the debate, Even today, when we're explaining away this phenomenon as entertainment versus seriousness, and we are actually devaluing seriousness, and pretty much certainly in India, every television anchor plays to that idea. We are very much part of this, where someone who's competent, knowledgeable, serious, is just not kosher for public life anymore, and I think the rot of that starts with the media. Would you accept that? Do you think we need to take responsibility? It's not enough to say that that's what the audience wants.
Well, here's the problem, though. If you're owned by corporates who want to get traffic and ratings, and your advertising is based on ratings and traffic, what are you going to do? Because a serious show does not get any ratings. It just doesn't. And, we've all tried to do stuff like that, and people don't tune in. They don't want to watch it. And then there is the question of access journalism, which is also such a rot, where, when the person comes on, you have to ask him softball questions, because if not, he calls up the network and he says, I'm not coming on again. And you do not get any points for an empty chair for your morning show. Where are the plaudits for the guy who doesn't get Trump on, because he took a stand or whatever? So I don't really blame media so much as thinking we have to just accept, instead of railing in a sense about politics and media and so, it's like we just got to manufacture the candidates on the other side who are as entertaining as Trump. We have to now start thinking, who are our pool of candidates that we go for? First of all, they have to be telegenic. They have to have a great story. We have to cast that damn candidate now with such a cynical entertainment value that they are going to have the same kind of appeal that Trump does. And when you look back, really, Obama was an amazing sort of sui generis candidate. The guy was charismatic, was a rock star, and he did have that quality. He could hold a stadium, but he also was a kind of amazing, magical one-off, actually. He was quite very rare, I think. One of these political talents that doesn't come along very often. The next level of Democratic candidate, or whoever's on the other side, you're going to have to start casting in that way. And when they start bringing up the names of someone who may run against Trump in the next election, it's pathetic, the names that they come up with. You just look at them and think, what a boring list of people.
But Tina, that's a truly terrifying thought that you've just enunciated. It's going to give me certainly sleepless nights if we are literally endorsing the idea that if you want to run for politics, you have to be an entertainer, And if that's what your conclusion from this is.
Well, my conclusion is I'm trying to be realistic. If I was in the DNC, I would be thinking, what can we do with George Clooney? Can we make that guy know enough to run? It's like, wow. I'm serious. There is that. Okay, so I'm not being wholly facetious about this. I think on the other side, media, someone has got to come up with a business model that works. Because frankly, the digital disruption has just blown up our world. It's blown up democracy at this point, because we cannot police anything now in the media, because there isn't any way to sustain a business model with real journalism, except for 2 or 3 places, which are the major places. Thank God for Jeff Bezos at the Washington Post, because he is so rich that he may be impervious to pressure.
We'll come back again to the crisis in the media. Before that, Tina, the big surprise in this has been that there was all this talk that women would vote for Hillary, but as it turns out, 56% of white women voted for Trump, even more than the white working class male. And 49% of educated white women voted for Trump. How do you explain this, Tina?
Well, it really has been a tragedy, the whole thing for Hillary Clinton.
I'm sorry, because we are getting a reverb on the stage. Can you hear Tina at the back?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
The whole Hillary's decades and decades of her story have been one long dissertation on women in power in America and how they have evolved, really. the rap against her is that she's not authentic. Oh, this is now reverberating strangely. Is it okay? Yeah. The rap is that she's not authentic, that she is guarded, that she, can't sort of be spontaneous and so on. But unfortunately, there have been decades and decades where she has been unallowed to be herself. She's had to put on these masks every time to fit herself into what was required to be a woman in power. When she was in Arkansas as the first lady with Bill Clinton, she was this wonky Harvard girl with Coke bottle glasses, a Yale girl with Coke bottle glasses, and she wasn't the Southern cake making, easy wife that they wanted. She was this intellectual that they didn't like, so she had to kind of pretend and fake it and so forth. So she's been faking it all the way through as First Lady. Again, they didn't like her until she was humiliated with Monica Lewinsky. Then they liked her great, because then she was a wounded wife and they could all relate to the wounded wife. That was the most popular moment that Hillary's ever had, was when she was a wounded wife. And the interesting thing about her is people like her in the job. They loved her as Secretary of State. She was very popular, senator. When she was seeking power, she was always absolutely despised. So there is this thing that women who seek power are immediately the subject of suspicion and anger and misogyny. As for the women, she's had a really difficult time with women all the way through, as a matter of fact, because she got no points as a feminist from the other feminists for staying with Bill Clinton when he was unfaithful so constantly. She got absolutely 0 points for stoicism in her marriage, or sort of taking her marriage vows seriously, if you like. A huge cadre of women despise Hillary Clinton for not divorcing Bill Clinton. They felt that that let them down, that she should have walked away from that marriage and walked away from that humiliation. So it's one of the ironies and sad things for Hillary, actually, that I would argue that, her loyalty, if you like, to her marriage, and her desire, her sense that there was more to it than simply, the things that went wrong, that they actually shared a tremendous bond, the two of them, and they really do. It's a deep, deep bond that they share, that somehow that boomerang. So for a start, she lost a lot of women, particularly liberal women. There's a whole cadre of sort of liberal, columnists and intelligentsia who always trash Hillary as being a fake. It was a bargain, power bargain, which could not be more untrue.
You've explained why Hillary wasn't attractive to white women, because 98% of the black women did go to her, the vote went to her. But that still doesn't give, okay, so let's assume they stayed away from voting for her. Why would they vote for a man like Trump? Can you help explain that?
Well, the interesting thing about that was I was recently in Texas, and I asked a lot of women there who did vote for Trump. Because I, like you, I'm baffled by a man who behaved as he did and so openly misogynistic and coarse and sexist and the stuff that he did. How could women vote for him? A lot of women feel angered and alienated, actually, by the sort of the feminist, if you like, microaggression uproars that happen when incidents happen of the flying soundbite of a crass remark, a coarse remark, and they don't take it as seriously as other women do. In Texas, these women, I said to them, how could you vote for Trump and the way he spoke about women? And several of them said to me, look, I have brothers who are, footballers. That's how they talk. That's just locker room talk. It's not important. Much more important to me was his economic message, that he was going to bring jobs back, make America great. I don't care if he's crass about women. And I said, well, but it was just, it was so demeaning, and yes, but you know what, that's guys, not important, don't understand. One of them actually said that she was really annoyed by the outcry at the way he'd spoken about the Miss Universe, the Venezuelan Miss Universe, who put on 16 pounds, and he fired her, and he kind of belittled her, and he called her Miss Piggy, and he, fat shamed her, and Hillary in the debate, very effectively, we all thought, brought up Miss Universe and said, there's a woman called, whatever her name is, something Machado, who is, been fat shamed by you and all the rest of it. And he just said, yeah, well, she did put on all that weight. Okay, so we thought, God, he's doubling down. He's going on about it. The next day, he started tweeting more about how fat she was. And It's like he's burying himself. No, I mean, the woman I spoke to in Texas said, look, she shouldn't have put on 16 pounds. It's like, you know what, she was a beauty queen. We have pageants here all the time. You don't win a pageant if you're 16 pounds too heavy. So I said, well, but wasn't he really offensive? And they said, well, you know what, bosses, one of them said to me, bosses can be mean, bosses can be tough, but he had right on his side. So I'm thinking, well, that's interesting. But maybe, you know, are we getting too kind of highfalutin and fragile about the things that make us angry? Isn't it more important for feminists to be angry about what is really going on seriously, about, you know, equal pay and no maternity leave, and these are the things to be upset about, not his language?
But Tina, in fact, that brings me to this big cultural war. You know, after Trump's victory, pretty much across the world, liberals are really self-reflecting that are we too elitist, you know, are the values we are propounding not something that speaks to the masses? And I wonder if there's a danger now of too much self-flagellation, you know, because really if you look at it, that there has always been the small elite that stand up for whether it's the small elite or the proletarian, I merely mean that it's a small handful of people that have constantly pushed the boundaries of better human behavior. If you play to the lowest common denominator, people will always want to be, you know, anti-abortion, anti-gay marriage, anti-immigrant rights, you know, majoritarianism. So do you think that one of the fallouts of Trump's victory is that the whole battle, you know, post-World War II, I think it was taken for granted that freedom, empathy, all of these things matter, you know, it keeps the world safe. Do you think that people are going to be ashamed to stand up for these values?
Well, I definitely think that the worst message that the media has taken away is somehow, you know, we don't understand America, we have to have more people on the air, you know, who espouse those other kind of ideas, rather than actually standing up in the right way for a sort of full-throated defense of liberal values, but in a kind of robust way. Some of it is, I think, language, actually, and the way we have to start reframing how we talk about these things. I think the kind of the language of umbrage and sort of self-righteous hand-wringing isn't playing and is actually alienating, which is what I got from those Texas women. I think we need to be much more robust and much more humorous and using a kind of saltier approach sometimes to the things that offend us, because that's really gone out of the public discourse. There isn't really any wit. One of the people I most admire right now is the new leader of the Scottish Tory party. She's a woman called Ruth Davidson, who is a kickboxing, former territorial army, lesbian, you know, former broadcaster who decided she was going to run for the Tory party in Scotland, which is a dead issue. There's no Tory party in Scotland. They didn't even have a single seat left. It was all the Social Democratic Party under the Scottish National Party under the Democratic Party under Nicola Sturgeon, and the Labour Party. The Scottish Tory party was a dead in the water. But Ruth Davidson, she's so salty, she's funny, she's tough, she has a sense of humour. You know, when she has a horrible misogynistic tweet, she will kick back and say, "Do you kiss your mother with a mouth like that?" Tweet. And just like, boom. You know, she understands social media. She comes back at the guy with a tart-tongued comment. She's wildly popular, and she's gone from like no seats to 36 seats in the Scottish Tory party. And I talked to her recently, and I just thought, you are exactly what I'm missing in the American woman dialogue. Somebody like you.
But Tina, again, I mean, the reason why I'm saying this, because there is a kind of backlash, you know, as I said, where everybody on the Democratic or the left of center, the old, now the old values of the 20th century, is feeling this pressure. But let's put the shoe on the other foot. When we are now writing off Trump as being an entertainer, you know, I think someone put it very succinctly, saying that his voters didn't take him literally, they took him seriously. Whereas a lot of the commentators on the media and the Democrats and all those people, famous people that we saw on screen, were taking him literally but not seriously.
Yeah, brilliant comment.
But you know, when we are normalizing this, isn't it important to remember, like we were just discussing, what if Obama was caught on camera saying, "I love grabbing pussy because I'm a president"? You know?
Unbelievable. He would have died. died. He would have absolutely been crucified and died. And it's absolutely remarkable that that did not happen with Donald Trump.
Well, and Tina, in one of your columns, you wrote that the white working class woman actually doesn't care about this because they're really worried about the loss of manhood in the white working class male. And this economic distress that is creating a wave across Europe and America, and I fear very soon in India as well, is going to create this desire for, a pushback and a desire for parochialism. But again, can you help us understand whether one is overreading this white working class anger? Because again, the truth is that if you look at black working class circumstances and the structural distress that they have faced, they are not forgiven this feeling. So how do we read this complex situation? What is the correct way to move forward?
Well, there was a very interesting essay by Andrew Sullivan in May of this year, which I reread recently because I thought it was written in New York Magazine, and I think he actually did a very fascinating analysis of what was happening then. And of course, at that point, Trump had not won. He talked about how, Plato writes about how, when he was writing about Socrates, Socrates said that tyranny can come out of a democracy, out of a late-stage democracy, rather than out of other regimes that are different. And the reason is because as late-stage democracies get more and more and more freedoms, and which we celebrate, so you have gender freedom and all of the culture wars come down, and there is, people start to attack the rich, and then they attack the elites. You've got to the point where it's such a Tower of Babel of conflicting identities that there isn't any mutual comprehension between any of the disparate people, leading to tremendous loneliness, isolation, and a sense of precariousness, at which point you turn to the authoritarian person, as in the case of Trump, and we're seeing worldwide. And I think there really is something in that. I think that when you talk about the specific nature of the white working class, it's, we've heard so much about globalism, but I do think digital disruption is actually much more to the point here, because I did actually ask a big sort of titan in Silicon Valley who was going on about, we're going to retrain people, we need to retrain people. I said to him, when have you ever had in Silicon Valley a 50-year-old white guy who went back to retrain at a community college? I mean, just never. I mean, just never, never, never. That guy is dead. He's the dead white male. We did a cover on Newsweek of the dead white male, 7 or 8 years ago. And it's true that they don't feel that there's any role for them, and nothing has been done to empower them. Now, as you rightly say, the black working class have had this feeling forever. I mean, they don't feel as if anybody's made them feel better about anything. But this group has now, with social media, really developed an identity which Trump, frankly, identified and ramped up. I mean, it was Trump who basically said the forgotten
Make
man.
America
and
great
he was right. I mean, it's not, he did credit to him. He saw that. And Hillary really, you could argue, really abandoned somewhat that target. And if you look at her Democratic convention, it was all, minorities. Everything, it was beautiful and it was great, but it was everybody celebrating Latinos and gay marriage. And, and what was missing were the white guys. They just really weren't there. And Bill Clinton, actually, he saw this coming. He absolutely saw it coming. And he said to her campaign, there's something going on you're missing here. And it was almost as if, this data obsession that everyone has, they had all the data, but they missed the story. And I think that's just a real metaphor for what is going on in so many places. Everybody's obsessed with their data and their numbers and so on. But out there is this human story, this bleeding, poor frickin', laid off white guy who hasn't got a job and is miserable, and his wife, far from thinking of herself as, I'm a woman, I'm going to vote for Hillary, she's thinking, my guy is sad, he's lost his job, my father's lost his job, my brother's lost his job, she's bleeding for him. And so there's a lack of human connection between these data points, and that's, in my view, so much what Hillary Clinton's campaign got so wrong.
That's an important point, Tina, the fact that very often the self-righteousness of the liberal the liberal battalions is that you don't tune into the human sort of sentiment of the middle, the large middle. But, again, the question that I'd really like to ask is that this really has created a fault line about what is the idea of America. And a lot of people who voted Trump said that they did not vote for him because he's a misogynist, but because he's going to bring the jobs back. So, but it's a harsh question, Tina, that really, have we been believing in a fake idea of America? Because today when, the majority has voted, and it's the first time that an idea of America has really been at stake on the polls, this is the idea of America that people have voted for. So, do we have to face up to that?
I think it's heartbreaking, but we must remember that it isn't the idea of America that everybody voted for by any means. I mean, Hillary Clinton has won the popular vote by 2.5 million. That's a great many. She won the popular vote by 2.5 million. It's enormous. It's a tragedy that because of 70,000 votes in 3 swing state counties, she didn't win those swing states. The small numbers in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania was a bigger one, that was 70,000 for Trump. But the other places where she lost, which then tipped it over the Electoral College, were small handfuls of votes in these counties, and it's tragic that that campaign didn't get her into those counties and win.
So you don't think that this has changed the idea of America in that sense?
I think I think America has always had the red. There's always been a racism, for instance, is still profound in America. There's no doubt that it's one of those ironies.
But like you said, it's
8 years of Obama didn't make people less racist; they made them more racist. And there's a kind of in American history, you see these cycles of advance and backlash, advance and backlash. So what you're seeing as well was a profound backlash to Obama, warning him. There was a lot of resentment about Obama from race, and there's no doubt about it. I mean, people don't like to talk about it out loud, but again, if you travel outside New York, and you're astonished at how people talk about Obama, and this constant reference to the fact that he wasn't born in America, the basic lie that Trump proliferated, which was that he was a secret Muslim, that he was not born in the United States, was a different way of saying, he doesn't belong here. He's not like you. He's black.
So in fact, that's a great point, Tina, at which to move into the media, because the media has been a big part of what really went down in America. And I must admit that I come across as prejudiced. I think Trump is a disaster, but there may be others who think that that's good. So I shouldn't say it's what went down, but what happened in America. So let's analyze the media, Tina. We saw from that film that pretty much the entire mainstream media was pro-Hillary. They defended her, they put her message out there.
They didn't. They crucified Hillary. I mean, this is the thing what's so bizarre. The notion that the mainstream media was nice to Hillary isn't true at all. That's part of Trump's madness. I mean, the New York Times trashed Hillary year after year, day after day. Most of the liberal media were obsessed with Hillary and her emails. That's all they talked about. I would say that Hillary never had a chance to really talk about policy or anything she believed except in the debates. Every other interview that Hillary gave was about either the Clinton Foundation conflict of interest, so-called, where we see Trump's conflict of interest never even cross people's mind as a story that people should be thinking about if he won, and her email, which was a disastrous mistake she made and extraordinarily clumsily then dealt with. But that's all that people asked her ever. And the stories were relentlessly negative about her being a duplicitous, hiding stuff about her email. It was unbelievable. It was relentless. And actually, Jill Abramson, the former editor of the New York Times, who left 2 or 3 years ago, but she actually wrote a column in The Guardian saying, I got it wrong as an editor. We got it wrong at the Times. We continually, trashed Hillary Clinton. And actually, we were wrong to do so.
But Tina, if like this is the whole difficulty of speaking now at all, of even trying to analyze anything, is because, like you said, everything is true and nothing is true. And this reminds me of a Birbal story that all of us are familiar with, where someone challenges Birbal about the number of leaves on this tree, and he says there are 222,000 leaves on this tree, and the person says, no, you're wrong, and he says, oh really, go prove it, so. Yeah. That's pretty much where we are. But why did the media, if they were giving Hillary a grueling time, why did they misread the situation so much? And that's true, actually, of the media in India as well.
Well, I think that several reasons. One is, I think, we had 40% fewer reporters in this election than last time. because they've all been laid off and fired, right? So you have the collapse of, reputable media. Things are closing, journalists are laid off all the time. There are very few reporters left who have any sort of a budget to go out and report. They go instead of reporting, they go to polling. And the polling has been a fiasco, whether it's Brexit or whether it's Indian elections or whether it's wherever. Polling is now, I would say, an absolute waste of time, largely because, once again, the people that are polling, I think, go in with their own sort of bubble. I also think that they're looking at voters, the last voting rolls, instead of the people who, that Trump activated who weren't voting. And I also think that people lie to pollsters now. I think that they think the pollsters are just interfering liberal people and they don't answer. And then, of course, they can't even reach them because that used to be a landline thing. So all of these things means that polling is a total fiasco.
But Tina, are we really looking at a post-media world? We are post-truth, we are post-everything. Are we now really post-media? Because in America, and that's true now even of India, that in America, 64% of the public get their news and their views and their perspective on the world from social media. And the mainstream media that we call mainstream is irrelevant, really. Another statistic is that 44% of America now gets its perspective from Facebook. And we've been talking about, this kind of fake news that Trump was putting out. Can you talk a little bit about that phenomenon, Tina, that what is this level of fake news? And again, how are we going to combat it,
Well, I think the fake news is absolutely a terrifying new phenomenon. But, you're also, I think, going to see with Trump, which is really scary, he's already using YouTube as a place just to go on, make his address, and get off. He doesn't see the need to ask or be asked any questions. And I don't think there will be a Washington press corps at the end of his presidency. I think he's not going to I don't think he's going to answer questions. He doesn't feel the need to answer questions. He can just go to social media, tweet, or do his own YouTube thing, or go on Facebook. He doesn't need anything to do with media. He doesn't need to have this aggravation in his life where they ask him questions that he doesn't want to hear. Now that he's won, he doesn't feel he needs to do it. That's what he kept doing as well in the campaign. He would just say, I'm not going on with Megyn Kelly at Fox, because she was the one who asked him that question about fat pigs and all the rest of it. He never went back on with her. She was out of it. She wasn't able to, she was not used in the debates. Fox folded because basically Trump said, I will not be interviewed by Megyn Kelly. And so she never interviewed him again. The fake news thing has really become a destroyer of our times. There's no question about it. I mean, that the things that people believe now are mind-blowing. I have talked to all kinds of people who believe that Hillary Clinton murdered Vince Foster, her advisor in the first administration, had him murdered, that Hillary Clinton ran a pay-for-play State Department, that she used to sell influence in the State Department, that Hillary Clinton, when she had a cough, was dying of cancer. And I swear to God, people actually said there was a double out there. It wasn't Hillary, it was a double. And I mean, we may laugh, but this is people, honestly, and you look at people and you go, where did you, you'd laugh and you say, oh yeah, they go, no, it's true. And you realize, and these are not ignorant people. I mean, my husband had a huge argument with somebody, two huge arguments, one at a dinner party and another one actually, he was on a bus going on. And this woman kept saying to him, no, Hillary Clinton has, had this FBI agent killed because, she wanted to quash the email situation. And he just kept saying, like, where are you getting this information? And she'd say, it was on my Facebook feed, and there's this new answer, which is like, everybody knows that. Everybody knows that. And it's the self-selecting news feeds that are coming in on Facebook. And that is why people were so stunned by the result, actually. There was a very good piece in the New York Times by the digital columnist saying that she was completely stunned because, her algorithm had just blocked out even people in her family who voted for Trump, because basically her algorithm had learned that she didn't like hearing racist comments, that she didn't like hearing misogynistic comments, that she didn't like hearing certain things, and she would hide those things on her feed. She wouldn't click them. And it meant that, therefore, the algorithm never delivered her anything except what she wanted to know, and so she was completely and utterly stunned.
In fact, I'm going to open this up to questions from the audience, but because we barely touched on the social media conversation, I'll just share with you that almost 38% of the news on the people who really hold right of center views and what is now called the alt-right, 38% of those news stories was all fake. And the fact that people really live in that fake universe, you're living in echo chambers, you're living in a really false universe, and yet that is impacting the real universe in which you vote and in which you create new structures of power. And Tina, I'm going to open this up, but maybe at the end, if you could address one of the questions that really seem to bother me, at least now, is that much like we have argued that capital needs to be ethical and capital needs to understand that it belongs to society, does technology now need some idea of ethics? Like you said, Facebook is creating algorithms that just completely wipe out contrary views. And Mark Zuckerberg, who pretty much defined this election, said that, but I'm not a news company, I'm a tech company. And he fired his entire team that was managing his trending and replaced it with an algorithm. So these are questions, Tina, that...
That was exactly the wrong message. And now we're all living in our very own North Koreas. I mean, that's what's actually happening. Thank you, Mark Zuckerberg.
Okay, so Kyle Edwards wanted to ask that, would Bernie Sanders have beaten Trump?
Well, that's an interesting thought. I mean, unfortunately, I don't think actually Bernie Sanders would have beaten Trump. Because I think, he was so far left and so socialist. Again, I think more of America wants to be successful in the Trump way than they want to be, a socialist. Although he had a huge appeal with the young, which is what was so tragic for Hillary, that they didn't really go for him. I think he would have done better. He might have just about pulled it out, but I suspect not in the end, because Trump... is a very, very skillful communicator, I have to say. He also was we have to hand it to Trump. He was very clever, really, in the way that he ran his campaign. I mean, you have to say, Hillary Clinton, she had all the money and all the establishment on her side. She had 17 field offices in Florida to his 2, and she lost Florida. So you have to hand it to him.
But Tina, I feel that this is where we again have to remind ourselves that while there are things to learn. Indeed, the Congress could have learned from Modi's handling of social media. And yes, the Democrats can learn from how Trump handled social media. But we have to remind ourselves that the reason he got that kind of traction is because he was just basically lying,
Yes.
And, you say the shitty remark, you lie, and are we all now being asked to come down to that?
Well, it wasn't only that he lied, I have to say. Bernie Sanders, a lot of Bernie Sanders' message and Trump's message were similar, really two sides of the same coin. Bernie Sanders also leveraged successfully and with real heartfelt passion, discussed at what has happened and how badly stiffed Americans feel, and they really do. There's the divide between the average working man and the super rich boss who earns 400 times more than he does. The fact that people really are working 3 times as hard to earn just a bit less. That's really what it is across the board, just a bit less, but 2 or 3 times as hard. People are so upset about that, rightly so. And he did identify that, and so did Trump. I would argue that Hillary really missed a trick, that she wasn't able to somehow convey the passion. That actually, I think the truth is, I think she actually probably more of all 3 of them, I think she's the most effective candidate to actually really be addressing some of those issues, but she was never able to communicate that passion. And of course, she wasn't willing to tell the lies that Trump did. I have to say that, no candidate probably in history has had to deal with what Hillary had to deal with. I don't think about it. She had the Russian hacking, and all the hacking that went on and all the leaking of emails that aired all the dirty laundry of her circle, which was out there making her look bad every single day. She had the Comey, the FBI director suddenly launching this absolutely inappropriate investigation. I'm sorry, but I just find it. Yeah. And thirdly, she had this desperate, lying, crazy misogyny on the other side. I don't think there's any candidate who's ever had to deal with such a perfect storm of things. She just wasn't able to.
And social media, which now counts for almost 1.4 billion people who are living in their own echo chambers, Rajat Tandon wants to ask that, are we coming to the end of an era of globalization and regional integration? Are Brexit and Trump markers of a completely new era?
Well, they are fascinatingly linked. I definitely think what we're seeing finally, and if you could argue it's really what took it so long, actually, it took all of this time from the financial meltdown in 2007 and all of this time for the sudden shoe to drop. You know how with tipping points, it goes like this and then suddenly goes like that. And that's what you saw with both Brexit. So is it the end of an era? I definitely think it's the end of an era when the super rich and the elite and the massive gap between rich and poor can just go on unaddressed. I mean, for years people have blathered about, oh, inequity, inequity, inequity. Now you're hearing from the other side of inequity, and it is saying, we're getting rid of you. It's over. So either that is addressed or we're going to be in for a very, very scary time.
Tina, this is the cruelest irony that the 21st century could birth, that working class anger gets channeled by this super rich billionaire who doesn't pay his taxes, and the first thing he does after he wins is take his daughter to meet Shinzo Abe because she's going to do some business with Japan, and he calls up Taiwan because he's got construction interests in Taiwan. I mean, we're living in a, you know, I think we need to articulate this more strongly and consistently.
Well, it is a grotesque cartoon result. But at the same time, it can blow itself up. That's the only thing to say. I mean, Trump has perpetrated a giant con. He really has. And it's really remarkable to see, you know, the bond, the charismatic bond that he has created with his audience. And there's nothing to be, I mean, it blows our mind to think that this guy who is a scam artist, who stiffs the working class guy at every time that he can. I mean, I know an anecdote about Trump where he refused to pay a tailor and said to him, you can say you made suits for Donald Trump. That's your payment. This is what he does every time. You could fill a stadium with the people whose bills he hasn't paid. But there is a terrible fact is that none of the media were able to land a punch on him. And I have to say, there I do feel the media totally failed, because they only really began to expose him in the last third of his campaign, at which point the manufacturing of the imagery was already there. The whole of the first period, they thought he was great entertainment. CNN has a lot to answer for. They kept putting him on, unmediated, his stadiums full of people. They just ran him naked. Hillary hardly ever got on the air. You know, it was not a show that they wanted to put on.
Yeah, sounds very familiar here as well. But Anup Nair wanted to ask that, you know, he thinks that Hillary stayed on in her marriage as part of political strategy. And, you know, I'd like to share with you that Tina, in fact, is very close friends of the Clintons, though I don't think her analysis of American politics stems from that. But could you explain why Hillary and Bill Clinton have lasted the course? Is it political strategy and did it backfire?
No, I mean, as a matter of fact, I think the worst political move she made was to stay with Bill Clinton, because actually in this whole election, she could not retaliate against Trump's grossest misogynies because she couldn't, because of her husband. And every time she sort of attempted to make that argument against Trump, he did constantly turn around and say, your husband did this stuff in the Oval Office with Monica Lewinsky. He brings out the 5 ex-mistresses and puts them in the front row. All of these women who have had allegations against Bill, stuck him in the front row, made her debate in front of him, which is one of the cruelest and most horrible things that anyone can do. And actually, again, I criticize the media. Where was their outrage about this behavior? I mean, this woman who is trying in a dignified way to debate somebody has to sit and look at 5 women who have slept with her husband, brought in and paid for to be there by the candidate. And she debated away and she didn't miss a beat. I didn't see any real media applause for that, or a sense of like, this woman is a freaking, you know, what are we doing to her, this person who's trying to just be a public servant? So staying with Bill Clinton, you know, the most, here's the irony about about Hillary Clinton. The most authentic thing about Hillary Clinton is the fact that she's in love with Bill Clinton. I mean, she's in love with a womanizing man. I mean, is that a rare thing? It happens. And she is. And he's hurt her horribly, and it has caused her tremendous pain in her life. And she will, you know, pain and anger and misery. But at the same time, they have an enormous bond. You know, they talk 4 times a day. When you see them together, they talk. These guys are absolutely, you know, they share so much. They've shared history, they've shared Arkansas, they've shared politics, they've shared pain, they've shared their child. They are a bond. And I defy anyone to say that a marriage isn't real if it is to the 2 people in it. So it's just part of the endless defaming of the woman, actually, to say that the authentic thing about her is a fake.
We're running out of time, but Rishi Srivastav has the question, I think, that everyone's betting on, which is that will Trump become, to a more conventional line now that he, or when he assumes the president's chair?
Well, this is a bit of a fantasy that I think people have. The idea that at the age of 70, Bill Clinton, who's never read an article about anything, who is already rejecting his national security briefings, which as president-elect he's supposed to have every day, and he's only had 3 because it's just boring stuff and he can't be bothered with his national security briefing. That's already true. With the president-elect has already basically dismissed the press corps. He's still tweeting insanities like people who burn the American flag should be sent to prison. Why does anybody think he's going to change when he's president? He's only got a few weeks to make this big metamorphosis before he's in the White House. I don't think he can change. I think that he is a absolutely reprehensible guy, I have to say, and I think that he is going to be an agony for the people around him, and then we're going to see the pathetic, spineless, jelly-like Republican Party trying again to figure out how to sort of keep in his good books while not being tarnished by some of the terrible stuff that he does. I do not think that he can do anything except eventually blow himself up. I do not see how he can maintain. And we've had crazy things happen in America, like Jesse Ventura, the wrestler, getting elected as governor of Minneapolis. I mean, ultimately, suddenly people came around. It was like a bad dream. Suddenly they thought, wait a minute, we've elected a complete clown. It could happen with Trump.
But Tina, last question, since our theme today is power and pushbacks. Where do you think the pushback is going to come from?
Well, this is so... Look, I mean, what is media going to do? I don't know about media anymore. It may not come from media. It may have to come from stringent activism. I mean, I know that maybe it's going to be getting back to the streets and really, doing what the French do and marching and protesting. I will say for Trump, he responds, he's such a demagogue and such a populist, he only really listens to crowds. It could be that that is the only way we're going to get to Trump. The pushback has to come from, I think, individuals of courage. I mean, the old great Václav Havel question, are you a collaborator or are you a resistor? Those are the only important things to know about yourself. And this is where we're all going to find out who are the resistors and who are the collaborators. And the resistors have to give full-throated defenses of liberal values at every turn that they can, whether it's on television or whether it's in live form or whether it's in writing or whether it's in marching or whatever. We have to make those values felt and not just go back into this fetal position or say, I'm going to go and live in Canada, which was the most pathetic response that I know that the Canada website crashed, the next day after. But then they're all back in their apartments, wringing their hands.
But it's, when Tina said that we have to resist, it's a measure of the twisted times we live in. I don't know how many of you are familiar with this man called Milo Yiannopoulos. He's part of the really vicious alt-right. And the clarion call that men like him and Alex Jones are giving to Americans is to join the resistance, So there we are in a very, very twisted world. One question that I did not ask Tina, which is really relevant to India, is that Indians in America were very happy when Trump won. And there are many Indians in India who were very happy when Trump won. What is a warning note that you would like to give to Indians before we get off the stage?
Make it India. No, I don't know. Beware of charisma. Charisma has lent people into very scary places. That's what I say. Can I just say, guys, that this woman, Shoma, is the best convener in the world. She's just so great. And I think that giving birth to Algebra is in itself a great form of resistance. So congratulations.
Thank you. But that's a really memorable line, let's beware of charisma. That's something to remember. Thank you very, very much, Tina.
Thank you.
And thank you, all of you. We'll be back in 20 minutes with Shashi.